Hello, hello, hello. My name is Tatiana Lee. I am the Senior Associate of Entertainment and Media here at Respectability. And Respectability is a disability nonprofit that fights stigmas and advances opportunities so that people with disabilities can fully participate in all aspects of community. My pronouns are she and her, and I will also give a brief visual description of myself for our blind and low vision audiences. I'm a brown skinned Black woman with kinky curly hair and a puff, and I'm wearing clear glasses and hoop earrings. I'm wearing a gray shirt, and I have a Black background with a Respectability logo banner behind me. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Leslie to introduce herself, and you are at our panel that is about advocacy burnout, what it is, and how do we avoid it. So take it away, Leslie.
Thanks, Tatiana. Hi, everyone. My name is Lesley Hennen. I am the Entertainment and News Media Associate at Respectability. I'm also a writer and a producer. My pronouns are she, her, and I will give a visual description of myself as well. I'm a white woman with brown hair. I'm wearing glasses and a white sweater. And I'm sitting in front of a Black banner with the Respectability logo in white and yellow. It's the same banner that Tatiana has as well. But yeah, as Tatiana mentioned, thank you all for taking the time today to join us for this panel discussion about advocacy burnout. What is it? How do we avoid it? And if you would like to view the ASL interpreter in a larger screen, we invite you to pin their video, which will spotlight their video throughout the entire panel. We also have live captioning, which is done by a real live person. That's available in the Zoom app by clicking the CC button in the toolbar at the bottom of the screen, as well as via your web browser. And we have posted that link in the chat box if you would like to view the captions in a separate window. This panel is live. We will be taking questions from you during the second half of the panel. So please go ahead and add your questions to the Q&A box if you'd like to ask us a question, or if you're watching us on Facebook during the live airing, we're monitoring over there for questions too. So feel free to put a question in the comments. This panel is being recorded and will be available on Respectability's Facebook page and our website after the event is finished. A high-resolution recording with open captions and our ASL interpreters will be posted and sent to everyone who registered next week. If you want to stay connected with Respectability, we invite you to sign up for our weekly newsletter on disability, inclusion, and equity in the entertainment industry. You can check out the link in the chat box to do so. And yeah, today we're talking about advocacy burnout. When you're a person with multiple underrepresented identities, disability included, that feeling of burnout can become real very quickly. So today, Tatiana and I are just going to share a few of our experiences and tips for navigating advocacy as disabled creatives and how to sort of handle that inevitable burnout feeling that comes with it. Please keep in mind that neither of us are licensed mental health professionals. We are just two disabled creatives who are sharing our own personal experiences with advocacy burnout. And we encourage you to check out the number of different mental health resources that we have posted in the chat as well, if you'd like to learn more about each of them and how they might be able to help you as well. Whew, okay, that's the intro. Tati, you ready to get to some conversation?
Yes, now we got away with all the nuts and bolts and all the stuff. Let's get into this conversation that we are both been really excited to have. This is something, like she said, as Leslie said, as a creative, we both experience and really want to tackle and talk about how we handle it. So I will start with asking Leslie, how did you get started as both a creative and a disability advocate?
Ooh, great question. For me, I definitely started as a creative. I've always been a writer ever since I was a little kid. I've always loved writing. I started writing, like making up my own short stories as young as like probably kindergarten or even before. And I remember there's like one specific memory from first grade that I remember. This woman came into class and she had like all these little toy like clay figurines. There were like different animals or like different people and like different things, and she just like handed everyone like a bunch of them and was like, okay, give them names, make up stories, like write a story about them. And it just like blew my mind as like a 7-year-old. I was like, whoa, like the power was like so much. So that's like a very distinct memory I have of like realizing I loved storytelling and learning like writing. I loved reading. And so I was like, oh, I can write things that other people will read. And like, that was just like a very pivotal moment that I remember. But yeah, so that continued like all the way through like school and college. And after college, I got involved in improv and sketch writing, which then turned into TV writing. Because I think you and I have talked about this a lot, but it's like growing up as a disabled kid, like you don't see a lot of representation on screen. And when you do see it, it's like just not accurate at all. So I think I grew up wanting to see myself on TV, but not knowing how to do that. So once I was able to like put those pieces together, it was like, oh, I can tell my own stories and write my own TV shows. That was like a really pivotal moment for me. So then once I started learning, like realizing that I want to write about my own experiences with disability, that was kind of when I realized I also had to be an advocate, because it was like, I couldn't write a lot of these stories or tell them in the way that I wanted to tell them, like authentically and intersectionally, without also being an advocate in a lot of rooms. So yeah, but how about you? How did you get started as a creative and an advocate?
That is so funny. I probably feel like the average kid figures out the core of who they want to be by 7, but people do not give 7-year-olds enough credit.
Right.
Um, Same thing happened for me when I turned 7 years old. Well, similar thing happened for me when I was 7. My mom bought me a camera. And the first thing I wanted to do was organize a photo shoot in the front yard. And I wanted to like do modeling, and I would do monologues in the living room. Like I just knew at 7 I wanted to be a performer and be in front of the camera. And then growing up and for the same reason, not seeing representation of myself. And it was like every time you did see it was so inaccurate. And then, also me as a disabled Black woman, I really didn't see it, because any representation that I did see was of someone who was typically white. And so it was like, well, where do I fit into all of that? And so I used to think people in the industry, I used to think people with disabilities didn't want to be in the industry. So then, years later, got older and moved to LA, because where does everyone go to want to be in Hollywood? You come to LA, and came to LA, and I realized that there was so much lack of opportunities and access. Like, people always tell you it's not about what you know all the time, it's about who you know. And I wanted to network. And when I wanted to go to places to network where, industry people were, I literally couldn't get into the rooms as a wheelchair user. There weren't wheelchair accessible. And so really, I became an accidental advocate, because to your point, to be in these spaces and to just be a creative person in this field, you have to advocate, because otherwise you're not going to get into that writer's room. You're not going to get that audition. And it's like you're not going to have your stories be able to be told in the way you want them to be told. And so that's what happened for me. And it was just like, I did not plan to be an advocate. I was like, I just wanted to move to Hollywood, have a thriving acting and modeling career, and just live my best life. But then it was like, skirt. And it was like, okay, what do I do? Okay, now I have to speak up. And, we learn that as kids, we learn how to advocate for our disability. But then I think no one ever tells you as a disabled kid, you're going to be doing this for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's so true. And I also love what you said, how you thought when you were a kid, you thought that disabled people just didn't want to be in the industry. Because I feel like I had a similar thought, but it was like, oh, like I'm disabled. There are no disabled people on TV, so I can't be on TV. It wasn't even like oh, like people don't want to. It was just like, and no one ever explicitly was like, you can never be on TV. But it was like, as a kid, as you're watching all of these, like you don't see anyone that looks like you anywhere. It's like, oh, okay, I'm not supposed to be in these places. And
Yep.
so you just sort of like internalize that. And then now I'm unpacking it like years later in therapy, but it's like, I thought that was such like a key moment that I also had, was like sort of this realization of like, why no one, like, why did I think that I just couldn't do these things? And that was also what led to be like, oh, like I have to do all this advocacy work to like do the things I want to do. So yeah, I think that's a journey that I'm sure a lot of other disabled creatives or anyone from underrepresented groups can identify with. It's just that feeling of like, okay, I have to advocate for myself. And as kids, a lot of times, like I remember being in gym class and they would be like, okay, like tell me what you need. And I was like, I'm 7. I don't know what I just can't do this. Like,
Exactly. It's like,
oh
so I'm just
yeah.
gonna sit over here and
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a lot of like, there's this expectation to self advocate and also not being taught. Like a lot of, I was personally never really taught how to self advocate. It was just sort of like, let us know what you need. And I was like, I don't know what I need. Like, what are my options? Like, so I think that has
exactly.
sort of like that realization of like all of these things that I never learned as a kid has sort of turned into like why I want to advocate today. So like, people like kids today or like people out of any age like aren't dealing with those same things. Hopefully at some point we'll
Exactly.
get there.
Trying to figure it out when you get to be like
Yeah.
our age. It's like, I don't want them to have to be trying to figure it out. Like,
Yeah.
same thing with me. It was like, I was taught to advocate as a kid. And, my mom was like, no, you're going to sit in this IEP meeting and you're going to let them know what you want. You're going to tell the doctors, like, what's going on with you and all those things. But then to your point, it's like, I don't know. And it's like, how do I
Yeah.
figure that out? So it's like, how self-aware do you expect a 7-year-old to be? But then, as adults, we're so self-aware. And I think actually that's another part of the burnout that comes is because now we're at this point where I feel because we've come up against so much opposition in your life, you have no choice but to be more self-aware than probably the majority of the rest of society. And
Yeah.
it's interesting, but then that comes that additional layer of burnout because you're like, how are you not seeing this? And I think it's like this thing where it's like you're seeing it, no one else is, and it's exhausting even knowing that.
It is that, yeah, that awareness just in general is so exhausting. And then to constantly have to realize that other people aren't aware of it is like another layer of exhausting.
Yeah.
Yeah, this kind of goes into our next question though, which is how has wanting more space to be creative led you to wanting systemic change?
Oh, that's a good question. And I think when I got here, so I'm the type of person that and it's just naturally been a part of my, I don't know if it has to do with, growing up being a part of, multiple um underrepresented or not underrepresented, historically excluded identities, but
Hmm.
I have this kind of feeling of you're not going to stop me from wanting what I want. And this is what I want. I know what I want. And I'm not going to let anyone or anything stop that from happening. And so I spent many years. I've, been in Los Angeles for 11 years. I've worked in the entertainment industry as an actor, as a model, as a social media influencer, and as a speaker, and doing all these things for about 6 or 7 years now. And so you kind of get to this point where you're like, I want to do all these things, and you see the barriers that exist. And I think working as a creative, being an actor and being a model and doing all those things, you see the gaps. You see the gaps in where things exist. And you're like, again, to my what I said earlier, why is no one seeing this? And so now you're like, okay, no one is seeing this. So I have to say something because otherwise I'm not going to book that next modeling job. I am not going to get that next acting job because you didn't make this studio accessible for me to be on, and things like that. And I remember, I'll never forget, and this was before I had an agent who, having an agent is great for your career. It really helps opening up doors. But before I had an agent, I was just going on casting websites and submitting myself. And I'll never forget this moment shifted so much for me, on top of not being able to physically get into rooms because it wasn't wheelchair accessible. That was one of the big pieces. But I had submitted for this modeling gig, and it was even for just background. It was like a background, like you weren't even the main model. You were like a background model. And I submitted and they accepted me. So they were like, yay. So I'm like, yay. Okay, I booked a modeling job. I can, try to get a couple dollars here and there because, not being able to work and go to different places, that's also another thing. So you're like, where am I going to get my next paycheck from? How am I going to pay my rent? And then, trying to advocate for even just getting employment is a whole nother thing too, just everyday employment. And so I was going for this modeling job, and then the day before I messaged the lady, the production, because they gave me all the information, and I said, is this place wheelchair accessible? And they said, no, it's not. Why? Do you need wheelchair accessibility? And or no, are you in a wheelchair? No, that's what they said. They said, are you in a wheelchair? And I said, yes. And they said, oh, well, we didn't know that. And I said, well, if you looked on my thing, it says, I use a wheelchair and I have spina bifida and all these other things. They didn't see that. They only saw my headshot of my face, didn't click to read more information, and assumed I was non-disabled. And
Mhm.
so at that moment, the lady made it seem like it was my fault and basically was like, well, let me call you back. And then said, well, we're going to have to let you go because she says, oh, we're going to have to let you go because we want the shots to look uniform. And so therefore we need someone else. And I'm just mad. I got to go find somebody else. And she blamed, like, made it like, and I was like, what is
Oh
this?
my
And I was
God.
like,
Yeah.
is this how everyone feels? So just because I'm a wheelchair user, you don't think I'm good enough to be in this generic shot? And it's like, we have more work to do. And so I think from there, it was just with the wheelchair accessibility and having to constantly have these conversations to even explain to someone why I should just be included, I think got to the point of where my passion was. It's just like seeing it just frustrates me so bad. And
Yeah.
so that's what happened. So like what happened with you, and what made you want to do more systemic change and
Yeah.
in these spaces?
I feel like, I mean, it all does go back to that like awareness. Like once you start to realize the systemic barriers that you've are like faced as a person, like for me, it was like disability specific. It was like, it was like once I realized, oh, it was like the way society views my disability, not that like there's something wrong with my disability. That was like when everything clicked for me. And I was like, oh, well, now I just have to change society. Like as if that's like but it's like, you can't, I feel like once I was aware of that, I couldn't not just try to change everything. And then it was also just like writing stories about my disability and like pitching them, like even in like with other writers, like in a classroom environment, it was like feeling like I had to just like explain so many things that other people don't have to explain. So it's like the entire concept of being disabled, like just different, and like people will say things, like, oh, like I don't know if that like this doesn't feel super believable for me. And I'm like, well, that's literally my, like this
Like,
happens to me all the time. And so it's like trying to separate like authentic, like lived disability experience from what people have seen on screen, like for years and years and years and years. And so it's like we're constantly just going against like these
yeah,
historic, like these negative and like false
yeah,
stereotypes. And
yeah.
so it's just been like so much, yeah, it's like once you realize what's out there and like what needs to be changed, I feel like I can't I can't not try to change it.
I I I I think of the perfect thing when you said that. I thought about that and I was like, the rest of society gaslighting us that our
Yeah.
experiences aren't our experiences, or that we should play down our experiences, or that it isn't that important, or all those kind of things. It's gaslighting, and it's
It
like,
really does. Yeah. And that's so exhausting too. Like that, again, it just like keeps adding to this feeling of burnout as you're like, I just want to write. Like, I just want to tell my own stories. But then it's like you're constantly being bombarded by all of these different things. And it's also just like the entertainment industry in general is not easy for anyone. Like it is very, very hard to get anything made at all. And so then when you add on top of it all of these different barriers for like multiple different underrepresented identities, it's like the burnout is like, I'm exhausted just talking about it.
I know, I know. So we've talked about like our goals and, burnout and things like that, but we also talk about or need to talk about, and I think we don't talk about as a society enough about balance.
Yeah.
So my question for you is, how do you balance your creative goals that you have and your passions with advocacy? Because now, people can see that we are, or that know we're passionate advocates. So how do you balance that passion with your advocacy goals and other also daily life? Because, we have creative goals and then we have to advocate, but then we still have, lives. We both have families, pets, and bills and social lives. And so it's like, how do you balance all of that?
Yeah, great question. First of all, I will just say that it is hard and I do not always do it well. And so I think once I got over this idea of like, oh, I have to be perfectly balanced all the time, like once I got over that mindset and just realized it was a process, like some days are going to be easier than others. That has helped me just sort of feel more comfortable with the process of like trying to balance it all, because there really just is so much at the end of the day that everyone is trying to deal with. And like realizing that about other people as well, I think is super important. It's like, I'm balancing everything I'm doing, you're balancing a whole other unique set of things, like everyone else is balancing, like we have no idea what's going on. So I think just generally like treating people with kindness and like trying to realize that is like a good way to go. But then for me specifically, I'm a Virgo Libra cusp, which means I'm very organized. And so I have a spreadsheet for everything. So I have like for my creative, like my writing goals, I have a spreadsheet of like all of the script ideas I want to get done in the upcoming year. I have like all of the fellowships or competitions I want to submit to in the upcoming year. And I will like track. It just like helps me feel a little bit like in control when I can be like, okay, I'm going to submit to this thing by this day. And like I can block off on my calendar, like I am going to write for 1 hour on this like specific idea, and then I'm going to submit to this specific thing. And then within there, I can also fit in all of my work things, my family things, medical doctor things. Like I know in this upcoming year, I'm going to have to probably start the process of getting new leg braces, which is like, and I just moved to LA. So like I have to find a new doctor first. I have to get a referral. I have to get all of my paperwork transferred over to the new doctor. And then I have to get a fitting. Like it's just like this whole process that I already know I'm going to have to figure out how to balance. And so for me, it's a lot of just like looking at my goals, looking at my like work projects, like other responsibilities I have, and just figuring out where I can slot things into my time. And also like being very intentional about planning, like it sounds so lame, but I have to plan my free time. So I will block off, like I will do nothing from like this time to this time, and like really being intentional about like self-care, which like free time is self-care. Like you need to take time to just kind of unwind and relax. But yeah,
Definitely.
that's how I try to balance things. It doesn't always work. Some weeks are better than other, but well, what about you?
Um, so first of all, I commend you for being like such a great planner. I am not. My ADHD and my dyslexia is not set up for that. Although I'm working on it. I will say I am getting better because I'm constantly adding things to my plate. And well, not adding, but things just come to my plate. So I am learning, and you've been a great help with helping me with that too. So thank you. But
I'm
I
honored.
think one of the things that and this is something I've been talking about with my therapist is that I've really had to work through is number one is letting go of caring about um what others expect of me. I think that
Mhm.
was one thing that I've had to work through this year, was like, forget all the expectations others have on you, whatever your mom thinks you should be doing, what your boss thinks you should be doing, what this person thinks you should be doing. You know what you can handle in whatever moment, and you need to assess that and deal with that accordingly. And if one thing you can't handle, that's okay. And if someone has a problem with that, you have to be okay with that. So right now, I'm working on learning of allowing people to, me being okay with people being mad that I'm not answering their calls, or, I can't get this one thing, or I have to say, oh, can someone else take this on, or something like that. I think being very intentional about that and being honest about what I can take on and what I can't. Where before I was always that person, I always felt like I had to always say yes. Anytime anyone asked me to do anything or be there for them, I always had to say yes. And so, really balancing that, I think, has been really key for me. And the other thing which you mentioned is self care. Taking those moments to be like, you know what? Today, I'm going to do nothing. I'm going to turn my phone off. I am going to give myself a facial. I'm going to take a bubble bath. I am going to cook my favorite meal. And I think really finding those things that I love to do that like isn't something that's exhausting for me, that brings me joy in those moments. Of course, the work that I do brings me joy, but it is exhausting too. So it's like those little things that give and fulfill you back in yourself, like those self-care moments. But my favorite is bubble bath and things like that. So I love doing those things, and just I'm still trying to figure it all out. And it's funny that you talked about getting braces and all that stuff, because I also have to go through the same thing with my wheelchair, because I'm due for a new wheelchair, and that process is like a year and a half daunting process. I actually have to get
Yeah.
started.
Oh no, we got to get started. We got to go. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
One thing also I forgot I was going to add that I've started doing recently that I really like is well, I used to do a gratitude journal. So like every night I would just write down three things that I was really grateful for that happened that day. But something new that I started doing that I got the idea from TikTok. So shout
nice.
out to, I don't remember the name of the creator, but thank you for this idea. It was like an energy journal. So I write down like three things that gave me energy during the day and three things that took away my energy during the day. And so, and it's not even like, okay, like these things that took away my energy, it's just sort of like being aware of them, not necessarily like, okay, I'm not going to do these things anymore. Cause like some of them we have to do, but it's like just being aware, like, okay, when I have to do this thing, it drains a lot of my energy. So like being like thinking ahead and being like, okay, what am I going to do to sort of give myself more energy to sort of get that balance back into check, I think is something that I've been working on that has been just really interesting. Sort of like a fun self-experiment.
I love that. I love that. And actually, I've heard about that, and that's kind of I don't know if you know, but like that's where the idea of people that folks that have chronic illness came with the idea of spooning.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it's kind of that similar concept of like, what can I handle that day, and this one thing like just completely used up my spoons, and I only got 4 spoons for the day, and they're used up, so I can't do anything else. I'm checked out, like, and identifying what those things are. But I think I like that part about identifying what those things are, and it's like I can't handle this right now, or I can, and
Yeah.
dealing with them accordingly at that moment. I love that.
Yeah, it's something that's helped me a lot. The past year especially has been just like so many new changes and like we're still in a pandemic and it's just like it's so many things. So lots of energies all over the place. um
Definitely.
yeah. Let's see. We kind of touched on this already, but I think it's a good question still. Do you feel like you have to be an advocate in every room you go into?
Um, Unfortunately, most rooms.
Yeah.
I feel like there aren't few rooms where I feel like I have to do that. So I think that adds on as people don't understand your experience, and it goes back to that. Um not necessarily gaslighting, but not understanding your experience. And I think I've come to really realize that, like, people can empathize with your experience as much as possible, but they will never fully understand and get it. And so, me, I've been in situations where I've been in rooms that are, disability focused, but then is predominantly white, and them not understanding, or grasping my experience of being a black woman.
Mhm.
Um, or being black, or a black woman. And then I've been in spaces with other black people, or black women, and them not understanding or grasping or empathizing enough with my experience of being disabled. And so being in those rooms are very, very rare. And I think, one, my immediate family, like just my mom and my sister, like they've been around me my whole life, so they get it. So I feel comfortable talking with them about, and just being my authentic 100% self, and being as vulnerable as I can be. And then I think, and our media team, with Vanny and you, and like our little team, it's like I can feel I can bring my authentic, full, vulnerable self and be fully supported. And then there's a few other places, but it's very rare that I find a space where I can feel that. And that's why I think it's really great for folks to have affinity groups. I really think that's so important. And one of the things that I got to do this year, which was really, really great, was just kind of a ideal, but I didn't realize how therapeutic it was. I started a, group for disabled Black women. And we called it Disabled Black Girl Magic. And it was just come, and we didn't have any goal. It was just come there and just be you.
Mhm.
And it was so empowering to be in that room and to share our experiences. And it was so funny because so many of the women in that room were sharing their experiences, and every other girl in there was nodding their head and got it and completely understood and empathized with it. And it was like, yep, the same thing happened to me. And then we were able to talk in a way that was, that we understood, because that is the way we talk within our own families as Black women. And so to be able to be in that room and share your experiences of being a disabled Black woman, and everyone just getting it, was so, like, refreshing. I didn't realize how much I needed that. And I'm getting emotional just thinking about having that space. And
Mhm.
that's why one of the things that I tell you, if you don't have an affinity group, or just a group of people that understands or has similar shared experiences as you, create that space. And I think that's so important. And it was just so therapeutic for me. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with everything you just said. And I think, finding that community is so important. For me, like when I did the Respectability Summer Lab in 2020 as a writer, that was the first time I'd ever been in a room. It was a virtual room, but still, like, the only time I'd ever been in a room that was entirely made up of people with disabilities. And we were also all working in the entertainment industry. So it was like, I had never had that experience of like, oh, like everyone here gets it. Like we are all trying to do essentially the same thing. So I think that was just like such a cool feeling. Um, and I think as far as like feeling like I'm an advocate in every room I go in, yeah, I think I agree with you. It does feel like it is most rooms that I go into. And even like my disability is like it's physical, but it's not always visible, like depending on what I'm wearing. So a lot of times I will sort of find myself in these situations where I have to like prove that I'm disabled, or like a lot of times, because like I can do stairs, but I only if there's a railing. And so sometimes like if I'm like I used to live in New York, and so a lot of times this would happen where I would be on the subway, like trying to get up the stairs, holding onto the railing, and people would be coming down the wrong side and like wouldn't understand why I wasn't moving for them. And I would have to like in the moment just be like, I cannot let go of this railing or I'll fall down these stairs. Like and they couldn't understand because I'm like wearing long pants and they can't see my leg braces and they like don't understand why I'm not moving for them. And it's like this like moment where it's like I have like I don't know. I feel like those moments happen to me personally a lot where it's like I don't know that I have to advocate for myself until it's like in the moment and already happening. And then it's like, so that happens a lot. But yeah, like you mentioned, like our team, it's so nice to just, we all can bring our full selves, like every part of ourselves. And that's such like I've never had that type of like working environment before,
Me
like
either.
particularly working environment. So it's like a very refreshing, like whole new thing. And I'm like, everyone should have this. So that again goes back to like the advocacy work. It just kind of goes hand in hand because it's like, I will like everyone should have this. But yeah, and
I
I think it is
agree.
hard, especially because like certain rooms, like, and like using the word room like figuratively and literally, but it's like when you're with a family, like sometimes family members like don't necessarily get it either. So it's like
Don't get it.
yeah,
Yes.
you have to advocate for yourself within your family, and then that just feels weird. And then like I don't know, there's just so many nuances to all of this that it's like we're kind of advocating for ourselves all the time in one way or another, even if like I don't clock it as advocating. Sometimes afterwards it's like, oh yeah, that's why I'm feeling like exhausted today, is because I had to just like explain to a stranger on the street why like
Oh my
like yeah.
gosh. I know, and
So
it's funny, or having those weird, awkward, and probably anyone with a disability, listening can relate to this, or having to deal with that family member during the holiday that was saying, well, you're not disabled. And it's like,
yeah,
I don't feel like having to do a training with you on
right.
what is the definition of disability right now.
Pull out our
How
101
to eat my
presentation.
turkey.
Yeah, I know. Oh man, I have so many family stories I can tell right now, but
Oh my gosh, it's so funny. So we talked about like, sometimes only identifying that burnout in the in the moment. And also, if anyone has any questions that they want to pose or any topic they want us to kind of discuss a little bit, put it in the chat. We would love to hear from you. Any questions you have. Again, we are not healthcare professionals. We are just two advocates slash creatives that are navigating the industry and just sharing our perspectives and how we navigate it personally. But if you have any questions in terms of that, please put in the chat. We would love to hear from you. But I have a question for you, Lesley. Well, we identified that, sometimes it only comes up in the moment. But what is your process once you've identified the feeling of burnout? Like we talked about like self-care and things like that, but what do you do like in that moment where you're like, I'm super frustrated and I need a minute. You just completely used up my spoons in this moment. Like, I don't have time for you. What do you do?
yeah, great question. And again, I feel like it's such a process, like I'm still learning, but I will immediately go to self-care. And so it's like if I get home or I like turn off my computer for like a work from home day and I'm just like so exhausted, I will and again I go back to my little spreadsheet or my calendar and I'm like, okay, what was I supposed to get done today? Like what can actually be put off for another day? Like what can I realistically, I don't have the energy to do all of these things today. What can I do tomorrow, another day? And so I will just like reschedule something to another day. So I know I'm not, it doesn't feel like I failed or like I am not going to do something. I'm just rescheduling it. It's like a meeting. And so I will just kind of figure that out first. And then I will, yeah, like take a bubble bath, do a face mask, watch my favorite TV show, my favorite movie, just like take time. And I think I've realized for like, if I don't do that and if I try to push through, I can never get back to that balance. And so I just know that when I start feeling exhausted and just like, also if I notice like maybe things at work are taking me longer to do than they normally would, that's a sign of burnout for me. It's like I like if it takes me like 3 hours to read a script and it normally takes me like 30 minutes, I'm like, okay, something is I have to kind of reevaluate my energy today and figure out like what needs to go, what like definitely needs to happen and what can be done later. So for me, it's just sort of this like puzzle game almost of like figuring out like what do I have left in me to do for the day or the week or the month or whatever. Like sometimes I need to really think big picture too of figuring out like I have these really big deadlines coming up. How am I going to make sure that I meet them without like totally burning myself out? So for me, it's a lot of just like self check-ins and just like being really intentional with my time. But yeah, what about you?
Yeah, I think kind of the same thing, processing in that moment. And I take a step back in that moment. Actually, it was funny. I was just talking about that this with my therapist this weekend. She's like, in that moment, you just need to stop. She's just like, just pause everything. And, one of the things that works for me is deep breathing and, meditation, and whether it's listening to sound baths or, some kind of lo-fi or something that puts me in kind of this kind of more calmer vibration, has really, really helped me. So it's like, what puts me back in that space? So do I need to take a moment and breathe and, figure that out, and then, assess accordingly. Do I need to not take on a task right now and schedule emergency, self-care moment, or do I need to schedule a nap, or do I need to cancel all of my meetings for the day? And it's just like, I need to just go take a nap, because some days it gets so bad where it's just like, I can't deal with anything. I just need to go take a nap and just go to sleep and wake up tomorrow. And then some days you're like, I just need a nap, or I just need a moment. And so, sitting on my yoga mat and, doing that meditation and going and jumping and taking that bubble bath. But in those quick moments, the deep breathing has really been helping me. That's something I've been exercising a lot more. It's just, breathing it in and letting it out, and screaming, all of those different things, whatever you need in that moment. And it's like really assessing, checking in with your body and
Yeah.
assessing what your body needs at that moment, and being honest with yourself and giving yourself that. If you need to scream, go ahead and scream. There's nothing wrong with you needing a moment to just scream it out. If you want to get in bed for the day, there's nothing wrong with that. Get in the bed and cancel all your meetings for the day and turn off your phone. Like, that is okay. And I think that's one thing that we need to learn so much more, is that all of those things are okay. They're completely okay. And I feel like as a society, we don't, you know, preach that enough. Like, all of those things are okay. We don't have to be these everlasting energizer bunny of producing like content and producing output of stuff. And it's like, you don't have to
Mhm.
be that all day every day. And I think being honest with ourselves and analyzing that is so important.
Yeah, I agree. Especially that like once you get over the mindset of like, oh, I have to do all of these things, I have to do them all perfectly and I have to do them all at once. Once you realize that like that is literally impossible and no one, you don't have to do that. It's perfectly, it is healthy and okay to take a break when you need it, take multiple breaks. And I think, yeah, there's so much emphasis put on like quantity over like just everyone doing so many things, or like I know for writers specifically, a lot of times, you go on Twitter and like someone is saying like, oh, I wrote 75 scripts this year, like a great year for me. And you're like, oh man, I only wrote one script this year. Like this guy wrote 75. Like, how am I ever gonna? And so like you start to fall into that like mindset. And it's like you can't do that. And
Yeah.
just like everyone is on their own journey. Good for this person for writing 75 scripts. Good for you for writing one script. Good for anyone writing anything, honestly.
Even
It's
if
like
you got a page done.
yeah. Exactly. If you wrote down an idea to work on later, congratulations. That's a lot. So
Yeah.
I think just realize, yeah, just like you mentioned, we don't talk about it enough about how like it's okay to take breaks. It's okay to put your mental health and yourself first. And like, it's you are important, and like you have to take care of yourself, and like that's going to reflect in the work that you do at the end of the day. So
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah.
let's see, do we have any questions in the chat?
I don't see
Let's
any
see.
questions yet. If anyone has any questions, definitely that has to do with mental health, advocacy, burnout, any of those things, please shoot us a question, comment, any of
Yeah.
those things. And while we are waiting for those questions or comments, um, I have one last question for you. So we are at the end of the year, which I know everyone is looking forward to. Like pretty much the entertainment industry has shut down for the holidays. Um, we have Thanksgiving and so much more coming. So what is one way that you are going to try to avoid burnout going into the new year? And what are you doing to work on that this holiday to relax?
Ooh, good question. I love the idea of New Year's resolutions. Like I've always loved them. And then recently, I think I saw it was on Twitter, someone that the idea of also like setting resolutions of like things you're not going to do in the new year, like things you're going to like leave behind in the old year. And so I love that idea. So I'm going to try to sort of leave behind just a lot of the feelings that we've talked about today of like feeling like I have to do everything and I have to do it all perfectly and I have to do it all right now. And just like realizing sort of leaving that sort of feeling of urgency that I'm putting on myself, like no one is putting it on me. It's really me feeling like I have to do all these things like right now. So I'm going to try to leave that behind. That's one thing. And just really prioritizing my self-care. Like I think that as much as I really try to intentionally set time aside, sometimes it just falls falls on the back burner sometimes, even though like I will be like, okay, I'm really tired and burnt out, but I can, if I push through for just one more day, then I'll do XYZ, and then I don't end up doing that. And so it's like being like following through on my own actions. So I think that's a few things I'm going to try to do just to be more intentional and like just kind of leave those feelings of stress in the old year. What about you?
So one thing that I'm doing is, first of all, just taking some time to just relax, shut off, just regroup. One of the things I always, every year, I do a resolution kind of, actually, not necessarily resolution. I don't like to call them resolutions, but maybe goals. Um, or things that, these are things that I want to manifest for myself in the new year. So I write those down and thinking about that. And again, letting go of what does not serve me anymore that I need to let go. Like one of the things that I've been working with this year is letting go of not caring about how others feel about the way I do something or what I choose to not handle at that moment or those perceptions or things like that. And so that's one thing I've been working on, and definitely spending time with my family. My family and I are planning a staycation for the holidays, so that's going to be really, really nice. And just tending to my self care, taking those bubble baths and
Yeah.
all of those different things and listening to my music and all the things that I love that make me feel good inside and that really fuels me. Working on writing and getting those stories out that I've been so in my head that I haven't been able to get those stories out or those ideas. So taking time to write those down, I think is some of the things that I'm going to do. And yeah, so I think that
Awesome.
it. We do have one question that came in.
Yeah.
Um, Oh, okay. So someone had mentioned about, when I talked about like Spoonie, being a Spoonie, and there's like this, and I'll find some information. It's like, I think it's called like spoon theory, but it's this idea of, as a person, with a disability that, to Leslie's point of what she was talking about earlier, is that you only have enough space to, and I think this can apply to anyone, but more or less more Spoonie is for more the chronically ill community, because we as people with chronic illness may not have the same level of energy for, as someone else. So someone who's non-disabled, they can they can do the same thing that a person with chronic illness or disability can, but it's just we use a certain amount of energy, or we because we have to do it in a different way. So what does that look like? And being honest with ourselves of how much energy we have to do it. But then, we come from this society that puts so much emphasis on what you produce, how you can be an asset and all those things, and that, those type of ideals disproportionately don't include people that have chronic illness that may have less energy or use up more energy doing those tasks. So it's honestly processing that and being honest with yourself. And it's like, yes, I'm a person with a disability and I have chronic illness. And yes, I am very capable of doing my job and doing my job very well, just as much as any person who's non disabled. But yes, does it look different? Yes, it does. Does it use a certain amount of level of energy than that person who is non-disabled? Yes, it does. So I think being honest with that. And I'm completely paraphrasing, summarizing. But yeah, that's kind of the general idea of kind of, the and I think it's called spoon theory, but I'm gonna find
Yeah,
it.
I think so. I think you're right. And it's like generally like the spoons are really kind of like a metaphor for like you get 10 spoons to start your day. And then like as you go throughout the day, certain things take away more energy and then the spoons equal that energy. So it's like you have to do XYZ and that took 2 spoons. So now you have 8 spoons to get through the rest of your day. Then like more things keep happening throughout the day and then you keep using your spoons and then by the end of the day you're out of your spoons or maybe halfway through the day you're out of spoons. And so it's just sort of like a giving like a visual metaphor to your energy and spoons to kind of represent each other. But yeah, I feel like oh yeah, thank you for dropping that link in the
Yeah,
chat.
it's a medical website, a health clinic, Cleveland Health Clinic, or I just picked that as an option. There's a lot of different content out in the webosphere of information, but just, Google and do your own personal research on spoon theory. And that's essentially what we were talking about. Um, nice. They found it.
Right.
So yeah, we have about 5 more minutes. So I don't know if there's any other final words you have, or if anyone has any final questions before we finish.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I'm just looking at the Facebook. No questions yet, but I do see one comment from Gary who just says, thank you for reaffirming that it is okay to step back from the project and recharge. As content creators, it is essential. A great conversation. So yeah, just I guess my final word would just be it's take all the time you need to recharge from whatever you're working on and just knowing that so many other people are with you and we all are experiencing these different levels of advocacy and burnout in different ways. And so just just being aware of like everyone is doing their best. Everyone is dealing with so many different things, and we're all with you.
Yes. And I think my final words is, you said we're all doing our best. And I think just reminding ourselves that our best is good enough. And,
Mhm.
you can still set those goals. And if you don't get to it right now, that's okay. Look at it next month when you're feeling a little bit better, or when you have the mental capacity to work on it. If you don't have the mental capacity at that moment, that is okay. Take that time to veg out and do what you need to do, nap for a week, or maybe not a week, but if you need to, that's what you need to do.
Yeah.
That is okay. And it's like, take those bubble baths, listen to that sound bath, watch those videos. I love those videos, those calming videos that have like different things, like they just help me so much. Things with light, I love sensory light things. It's really calming for me. And
Yeah. You
sound
have your cool
baths.
new speaker that I'm
Yeah,
very jealous of.
I got this speaker that lights up, and I just things that just bring me joy and just make me say, oh. And I think that's it. It's like finding those things that make you say,
Yeah.
and
Just
it's
bring that
like,
feeling of like, okay, I'm here.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And
Mhm.
continuing to check in with yourself. And yeah, I think that's what I'm going to take. I'm going to use these next couple of weeks of the end of the year to take that time. Also set my goals for the new year. and figure out when I'm going to tackle them, try to being more intentional about planning. But yeah, getting that mentality of like, it is what it is, and I'm going to always do my best, and just being okay with that. Your best is good enough.
Yeah. Love that.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I hope everyone has a great new year, a very relaxing end of this year, very recharging and getting those goals ready for the new year. But yeah, I think unless there are any other questions, we can end with about 3 minutes left. But definitely check out the resources we posted in the chat. I thank you, Tatiana, for posting them again. So we have the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, Brown Girl Therapy, BetterHelp, the Trevor Project, To Write Love on Her Arms, RAIN, and the Born This Way Foundation. Those are just a few organizations that we really love. And each one of them has different specialties and different resources for different communities. So feel free to learn more, whatever you are interested in or whatever you think you might need. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining us and taking time out of your days and busy schedules to listen to us. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And I will just add that I threw in the chat, if you want to sign up for our newsletter, we
Oh yeah.
have a entertainment Hollywood inclusion weekly newsletter where we have casting notices, we have different opportunities for different labs that are going on in the industry that you can apply for, whether disability focused or not. Casting calls, opportunities for different things. So check that out, sign up to our newsletter, and also upcoming events. We will, always do different webinars, and, so if a webinar interests you, tune in, and stay up to date with all that is going on with our entertainment and media team and our work. And yeah, have a happy holiday. Enjoy yourselves, and be careful out there. The pandemic is, getting really, heightened even more again, which is, kind of frightening. So yeah, be careful out there, and, take care of yourselves the best way you need to take care of yourself. Within that moment, it's like everything I keep reminding people, that I have friends and family that's hurting themselves. I'm like, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and it's
Yeah,
like, that enough is stressful.
exactly. So true. Yeah.
So be gentle with yourself. Please be safe out there. Enjoy your holidays, but please be safe. Get vaccinated and boosted if you're able to.
Mhm.
Um, Please just enjoy and have a happy and safe holiday and end
Yeah.
of the year.
Yes. All right. Thank you, everyone.
For more information, visit www.respectability.org.